All right, today we're working with absolute value inequalities. So this is going to take a bit of different sections and putting it together. The first section you're working with is absolute value. You have to remember that the distance from zero, right, is that amount. So you'll have like two answers because zero goes in both from zero, you can go in either direction. But you also have inequalities. And we worked with compound inequalities where you had an and an or. And that's what's going to happen with these absolute value inequalities. So let's first analyze the absolute value of x equals 2. Well, that means x equals 2 or negative 2. So from 0, I can go in either direction, and it just equals negative 2, and it just equals 2. So there's no shading necessary. It's just a point on those amounts. Now, if I have the absolute value of x is less than 2, I want you to think about that on your number line, right? The absolute value of the absolute value of x is less than the number 2. So here's my number line, here's 2. Well, that means that some of these values less than 2 will equal, will be correct, will be x. So let's think of some of the things that could be x, right? 1 could be x, so I'm putting a point there. 0 is definitely less than 2. The absolute value of 0 is 0. 0 is less than 2. The absolute value of negative 1 is 1, and 1 is less than 2, right? How about like negative 3? If I put in negative 3, absolute value of negative 3 is 3. Is 3 less than 2? No. So that's why you can't go past this negative 2. And let's even try negative 2. The absolute value of negative 2, is that less than 2? No, it's equal to it. So you have an open circle at negative 2, an open circle at 2, and all the values in between are solutions, right? So it looks like an and. We've seen that, where you have all of these values are shaded in, and you have an open circle here, an open circle there, right? And that's our and scenario. So we have x is less than 2 and x is greater than negative 2. If you want to write it out, you have x is less than 2 and x is greater, so the inequality flips and the sign flips. And then you know with and scenarios, we write it in as one statement from negative 2 to 2. Negative 2 is less than x, x is less than 2, or start from the center, x is greater than negative 2 and less than 2. All right, here's another scenario. Let's say we have the absolute value of x is now greater than 2. So I want to think about that. The absolute value of x, all the values that are more than 2. So that's like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and so on, right? So that's easy. Open circle at 2, and then so on. But because of this absolute value bar, that means my negative values that are more than 2, like negative 3, negative 4, negative 5, are also true. They're also solutions for x. So I've got also an open circle at negative 2 and all those values to the left of it. So I have negative x is less than negative 2 or x is greater than 2, and you can see it's an or. They're going away from each other. All right, so I want you to practice, pause the video, do the absolute value of x is greater or equal to 6, and I want you to solve and graph the absolute value of x is less than or equal to half. So play it when you're done. So greater than 6, when I see greater, that tells me it's an or. So I have x is greater or equal to 6, or x is less than or equal to negative 6. So notice how I flip the inequality and I change the sign. So greater or equal to 6, close circle at 6, greater than it going to the right. For less than or equal to negative 6, close circle at negative 6, and all the values going to the left. Hey, that's an or. It should look separated like that. When I've got a less than symbol, absolute value of x is less than or equal to half, this tells me it's an and. So I do negative that number is less than or equal to x is less than or equal to that number, right? And that's saying the same thing. X is less than or equal to 1/2. We knew that. Or, and x is greater or equal to negative 1/2. So here's negative 1, here's 1. I've got half here. It's a closed circle because it's equal. And all the values less than it. And then I've got to be all the values more than negative 1/2 because it's an absolute value. So it looks like that, from negative half to half. And scenario. All right, cool. This does take some practice, but this is a nice start. And we're going to get into some harder ones now. Woo! Almost died. All right, cool. So, didn't die. That's good. Let's look at number 5. So I now have the absolute value of x plus 2 is greater than 1. Greater than 1, less than -1. That's my hint that it's an or scenario. So I have x plus 2 is greater than 1, or x plus 2 is less than -1. So notice I kept this one the same, and then I flip, change the sign. Flip, change the sign. So now it's just a one step. Subtract 2, x is greater than -1. Subtract 2, x is less than -3. So I've got an open circle at -1 going to the right, open circle at -3 going to the left, or scenario, they separate like that. For number 6, I have the absolute value of 2w minus 1 is less than or equal to 11. Less than, it tells me it's an and scenario, right? Because less than 11, here's my 11, it got smudged when it fell on me. Less than 11 is going to that direction, which means greater than -11 is going the other direction. They're going towards each other. So that's how I know it's my and. So I've got 2w plus 1 in the middle, less than or equal to 11, and then I added the greater than or equal to a -11 all in one. Because it's an and, it should be written together. I add 1 in all cases, I divide by 2, and I get w is less than or equal to 6 and greater or equal to -5. So I made a number line from -6 to +6, closed circle at 6, closed circle at -5, and then shading all in the middle. All right, hopefully you can get some more practice on this and it'll become more clear if it isn't already.